transferred at the University of Buffalo and St. Thomas Webster, and done a lot of different things in the football world. But a few different things I've been able to do in the football world. I, like I said, former player, but I got into sports media after college, and have been around the game as far as covering high school, college, pro a little bit as well. Freelance for The Athletic. The name that you guys have probably heard out there with football guys is Matt Waldman. I was contributing to his rookie scouting portfolio last fall with Towing the Line, which is an article that I wrote, or a series of articles that I wrote about offensive linemen and prospects and things like that. So now I still work for the Buffalo Bills for a little bit. So it's great to be connecting here with a fellow trench guy in Matt Bitonti. But I'll let him introduce himself. Matt, how's it going today?
What's up, Khari, and to the world? We are trying our first Down the Line football podcast. This is going to be offensive lines for the NFL. Breaking it down this week, it's the AFC East. We've got a little bit of video for each team. Try to keep it quick. My name is Matt Bitonti. I am the offensive line specialist for Football Guys. Before that, I worked at an independent website called Draft Daddy, where I was focused on the NFL draft. And I don't know. I just love watching the line. Everybody's watching the ball. I'm watching the line. And that's if you're a fan of that, that's what this podcast is about. We're gonna hope to move quick and do 4 teams in this podcast and maybe 4 teams in the next, and just sort of give everybody a taste for what their favorite team is offensive line is going to be looking like in 2024.
Absolutely. I want to just let me share first. My name is pronounced just like the NBA point guard Kyrie Irving. So for anybody out there, I know the spelling gets everybody, but just so everybody gets an idea, just how to properly say. But yeah, no, Matt and I have been, in contact for some time now, trying to get this up and running, and we really are excited to really, talk some offensive line, just because it's the forgotten position of the game. Really nothing can get done without the guys up front. And offenses, the best offenses 9 times out of 10 start and end with good line play, whether it's the run game or the pass game. It's so important. And you mentioned the AFC East and how there are those are the teams that we're covering division wise today. I'm gonna see if I can share my screen with you all. I have to show you guys this chart that Matt has put together for us as far as what we are going off of as far as rankings and things of that nature. He has put together this wonderful list of different factors as to where he ranks guys, why certain guys are ranked over other guys, all different types of criteria that play a role in this. So I'm going to pull this up, and Matt, I'll let you explain a little bit your thoughts on the ranking system.
Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the middle of the rankings. That's number 7 through number 24. You can see all the rankings at footballguys.com. They're free right now for the preseason. You can see the whole thing. But as you get into the regular season, those we cut off. So what you're looking at right now is the overall rank, which is 8th, the team name, and then I have a score, which is really just for me. It helps me set the grades and curve them. And the third column is cohesion, which is how I grade how much the guys have played together, which is, I feel like, a fairly unique variable to have. Looking at other people's rankings, and I do, I think you can set a ranking system and then be like, we're in the preseason and on paper this is a great line, but what does that mean for the regular season? What does that mean for actually setting your fantasy lineup in week 9 or placing a bet in week 10? Like, who's hurt, who's in your lineup? So right now, I have the concept of cohesion, and we're highlighting the 4 NFC East teams. So right now we've got the Jets at 8, which is a very high ranking for them, and we'll go into depth as to why that may or may not be accurate. Miami at 12, Buffalo at 15, and New England at 23. So none of them are terrible, and none of them are elite.
For sure. Yeah. So let me get back on screen here. So yeah, with as far as with the rankings, I think it's great place to really get this thing going is at the top with the New York Jets, right? I think the Jets are a team that have claimed a lot of headlines this off season. Obviously, when you have a 4-time league MVP at quarterback, who's coming off of an Achilles tear, being only being able to play 4 snaps last season, right? Being able to protect that guy, in Aaron Rodgers is definitely a big deal. So, the Jets were able to, make some additions to the offensive line this offseason. Future Hall of Famer and Tyron Smith at left tackle, as well as a rotational starter for the from the Baltimore Ravens, John Simpson, as well as another Raven, Morgan Moses, who has been slotted at right tackle. But one guy that we would like to talk a little bit about that we've got a clip that we want to dive into a little bit is Fashanu from Penn State, first round pick for the Jets this past spring. And Matt and I actually were talking a little bit about him off air. I think it's probably safe to say that he's their biggest wild card. Simpson is one thing. He's had his ups and downs throughout his career. Hasn't been great, hasn't been terrible. Really just someone who is solid in your lineup. Obviously, we know about Tyron Smith, what he is as a future Hall of Famer. He's had a ton of injuries throughout his career, especially in the last few years. So that's something that can hold him back. And as well as Morgan Moses, he's had some injuries throughout his time in the league as well. But I think Fashanu is really the wild card because, is he swing tackle material right now? Is he a guy that eventually will break into the starting lineup fully before the season's end? We have to wait and see. But, he's a guy that, has a lot of talent, really is more of a pass protector than anything. So I think he really does fit long-term projection-wise as their left tackle of the future. But at the same time, too, is he ready today to crack that starting lineup and be in that first 5? Just thoughts on Fashanu from there, Matt.
So, yeah, it was a very strong offensive line class overall. I thought at least 4 or 5 really good players in the first round all deserved their spot. And a lot of it came down to what do you need and what do you want, and the Jets, as you mentioned, have trying to protect Aaron Rodgers, and they have Tyron Smith, who's amazing, but has not played a full season for, I don't know, 9 years or something like that. And the Jets have the first 3 games in 10 days. So you're talking about Fashanu could see a start pretty early. And he's not in my rankings as a 6th starter. He's in my rankings as a swing tackle, which is like half a starter. But it's interesting that they're paying attention to that and that they're paying attention to the future. Last night or whenever yesterday when the Washington Commanders played the Jets, Fashanu played a lot of snaps and Joe Tippmann played a few snaps at center, but most of the other guys that we talked about, Simpson and the vets and Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith, they're probably not going to see game action until the regular season starts. So it's like on paper they're 8, but who's actually going to play and how much of these guys played together is a question.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a great point. I think Fashanu is a guy that, just as far as like that litany of guys that came out in this year's class, whether it be J.C. Latham, whether it be Joe All, Troy Fatino from Washington, a lot of guys. To me, out of that crop of guys that went in the first round, I felt like he was the rawest. I think he had a lot of things that he had to really hone in on So I think he's come into a good situation, right? He doesn't have to be thrusted into the lineup right now today. And he's got some real good vets to learn from. But like you said too, I think it's so important just for the health factor. Yes, Tyron Smith was a second team All Pro last season, but he only played 13 games, and that's after a season where he played only 4. Season before he plays 11 games. Season before that he plays 2 games. So he's again one of the best to ever do it. But when he's missing that much time, you need to provide some insurance, right? But especially when you've got an aging quarterback, back there as well, who is coming off major injury, as well as a team that really wants to pound the rock. You've got one of the best running backs in the game with Breece Hall. You've got some other pieces as well offensively. So this offense really has the potential to be one of the best, absolutely, in the league. But it really is going to come down to how can those guys up front protect.
Yeah, I mean, should we roll the clip? I'm not sure. Do you have the control of this, or do I, or do we both
think
do?
You do. I think you
okay.
do. Yeah.
Well, here it goes. We're going to loop it and just talk through it a little bit. Right now, this is a first quarter play. Get Fashanu to the outside. The play was not completed, so fantasy people are gonna be like, well, that didn't amount to anything. But 74 is going against Clean Farrell. He was a 4th overall pick of the Raiders a few years ago at Clemson. Not a future grocery bagger of America type of guy. This is a real player. This is a real pass block set, and I think he gets out really well. I love his kick step. I love his mirroring, and it wasn't a perfect day for him by all means. He had a false start. He had some interesting problems in the run game, but overall, I think you like what you see when you look at his foot speed, and you can't really teach that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's so important to note too, like you said, not a perfect day, had some ups and downs, but this is why they drafted him, to be able to set the edge and lock guys up, that are coming off the edge. This is, his specialty right here. And this just gives you a little bit of a glimpse of, the promise that this kid has, and that the potential that he really has to become a future starter in this league, So being able to show this in his first game action, again, not the end of the line for Fashanu, but he has some a foundation level to build up from, because he comes in right away as one of the best pass protecting rookies in the NFL.
Yeah, that will get you playing time better than being a running mauler who can't pass protect, and then the coaches have to worry about their most valuable player back there. So obviously other teams have more mobile quarterbacks than the Jets. The Jets have an extremely immobile quarterback by comparison, kind of like a late stage Tom Brady or Manning. Just kind of, you really just need him to get rid of the ball as fast as possible. But there is a lot of clips of Tyron Smith in camp looking as sharp as ever, in drills. He definitely is rubbing off on these guys. Morgan Moses as well. That's type of any, I said this in a different podcast, but any team that would have signed Tyron Smith would have been a good signing. He's a good guy to add to your locker room. So whatever you think about the Jets, that was a good signing. What games will he play in? How many will he play? I think that's a very interesting question. I think the over-under on his total playing games this year is somewhere around 9 or 10. I don't think he's going to play 17 games. And if they're really thinking about Super Bowl, which is 20 games, it's a long stretch. So I think Fashanu is going to play a lot. And there's some interesting guys in that picture as well, like Max Mitchell, and there was like Wes Schweitzer got some time earlier in the game as like a guard center who could replace Tippmann if he got hurt. But basically, you're looking at what you got, and hopefully everybody stays healthy. Elijah Vera Tucker is another sort of guy. Will he stay healthy? So if everyone stays healthy, they earn that 8th spot. If everybody doesn't stay healthy, they fall. And that's how teams like the Dolphins or the Bills rise up the rankings. And maybe they start the year at 15, but you end up in the top 10 if you stay healthy and other teams get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think, you know, and we've talked a lot about the different units that are in this division, and I think I don't want to speak for you, Matt, but I think it's probably safe to say that the Jets are arguably the biggest wild card unit as a whole out of all of these, just because their high end potential is there. Like you mentioned, having a Tyron Smith, having an Elijah Vera Tucker, a Joe Tippmann, who had a solid rookie season. Not only you've got a good mix of, some high end talent, a mix of, some continuity. You've got some veterans, yes, but you've got some youthful talent as well. But like we said, like some of the injury concerns. Elijah Vera Tucker's played 12 games over the last 2 seasons. Even though he's a Pro Bowl type talent, that's great. But when that Pro Bowl type talent is on the sidelines, then what's the use of that? As well as, like we said, Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses. He last year was a bit of a healthier season for him, but he has missed action over throughout his career as well. He, spending time in Washington, and then was with the Jets for his season in 2021. But he missed 3 games last year, which was his first bit of action missing a few years. But that this is a guy who's 32 years old. He's played a lot of snaps. So these are just things I'm sorry, 33 years old. These are things you just have to consider when
he actually
assign some
he played through a pectoral, so he was hurt, but he played hurt for a long time, and then he got the surgery after the season. So tough guy, It's very interesting because I have a guideline with the other rankings. If your team replaces 3 starters, you're usually at the bottom of the rankings, in the offseason. That's usually admission of, our line was not good enough and we need to totally revamp it. So your cohesion score is going to be terrible. And then for them to be in the top 10, even despite that, just speaks to the individual grade of Tyron Smith and how my rankings favor tackles over guards. It's just kind of how I set up the math. So if Tyron Smith played guard, they wouldn't be in the top 10. It makes a big difference to have a premium left tackle in my rankings, and as I think it does in real life. You can't just put anybody out there, as you'll see with the Patriots later. But do you mind if we move on to the next team on our list, which I think is the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so Miami Dolphins, they check in here at number 12 overall, listed as a B+ offensive line group. I'm just going to pull up their starting unit here. Now, again, this is another team that has Super Bowl aspirations. You get the deal done with Tua, you get the deal done with Tyreek Hill. You draft Jalen Wright to a backfield that already has Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. You add Odell Beckham. Obviously Jalen Waddle's there as well. The major addition for this unit is Aaron Brewer, who the Dolphins were able to sign from the Titans. But I think so. To me, the thing I like about the Dolphins unit is, like you said, Matt, as far as like having an impact guy at tackle, which is what they do. They have Terron Armstead. He's definitely one of the best left tackles in football, one of the best tackles in football, period. But again, another guy that we're talking about who, again, is getting up there in age. This is a guy who played a ton of snaps while playing for the New Orleans Saints. He's 33 years old now, and missed some time the last few years. Limited to 10 games last season, limited to 13 games season before, 8 games season before that. But he's been a Pro Bowler in 5 of the last 6 seasons, including a second-team All-Pro selection in 2018 with the New Orleans Saints. So, again, an impact guy that you got, and I was going to say at Tua's blind side, but Tua is a lefty, so that throws things off a little bit. But, some continuity as well. We're seeing a Dolphins unit that is bringing back Isaiah Wynn. I'm sorry, not Isaiah Wynn, Robert Jones. is bringing back Austin Jackson. Now these are some guys who didn't necessarily have not necessarily showed their best as of yet, but some guys that have some potential, but two guys that, although they haven't necessarily been considered, major stalwarts and guys that will be entrenched as long-term starters, they showed their best last season. So I think to be able to get more, to get better play out of those guys will be major. One other thing as well is, like I just mentioned, Isaiah Wynn, who has been regarded as, one of the more versatile versatile offensive linemen in football, since his days with New England. However, again, another injury guy. He's starting right now on the PUP list. It's not clear whether he'll start the season on the PUP list or if he'll be able to get healthy enough for the start of September once the regular season hits. So I think it's this group is intriguing to me. Like I said, I know the Jets may be, in my opinion, the biggest wild card, but I think Miami's number 2, as far as wild cards unit wise. So Matt, I'll let you dive in here a little bit. What are your thoughts on this Miami line up front and just the group overall? I think you're muted. Matt, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I am very new to some of this technology. I'm trying out the banners. I'm like a kid in a candy store. So I was going to say you did a really good job summarizing it. Terran Armstead is your guy. How much is he going to play? Like, there's 17 games in a season. They're not going to always prioritize these older veterans, going all out for some of these non-conference games or games where they're in a bad spot on short rest or whatever it is. So I don't think he'll play all 17 games, but the games that he's in, he makes a huge difference. The games that he's out, you can see that the numbers very much affect the offense. But they're an outside zone sort of running team. They love to get these really fast sprinter type guys like Mostert and Achane into space. I think Jack Driscoll was an interesting signing from Philadelphia. They have a lot of pieces, like Isaiah Wynn. I don't know that he'll be ready. He has a huge, injury history, but like guys like Liam Eichenberg, you're going to see these guys in the clip that I'm about to play. This is the second team line. This is not, Terran Armstead time. But what I really wanted to show and highlight here in this loop was Jalen Wright and their little cutback outside zone. This is yesterday or the day before against the Falcons. They get good movement, and they're a well-coached group in terms of what they're expected to do in the system. And I think they have a lot of good pieces. So will the lineup be consistent from week to week? Probably not. They lost, Robert Hunt. It's free agency. But they have a lot of developmental interior guys. As long as Austin Jackson and Terran Armstead sort of maintain their presence in the lineup, this is going to be an above average group. Good for run and the pass. Good to get fantasy points, especially early in the year. I feel like the Dolphins just in general have a problem with peaking too early, just as a team, where they just come out so on fire, and then the weather changes and they seem to be out of gas. I don't know that they'll be able to ever fight through that, but I like this offense for a lot of reasons, and the way they run is one of them.
Yeah, I think you make such a great point there, Matt, about they're very well coached up. I think out of really all of these offensive lines that we'll be discussing today, I think this may be the best coached group. So I think that also gives them a little bump in the rankings. It's when you've got an offensive line that is really suited for a system, I think that really goes a long way. As I've gotten into coaching the last few months, one thing I've always said about, when it comes to coaching that to me makes most sense is you acquiesce to the players rather than the players acquiescing to your system. So when you've got a system that is not only, schematically strong, but one that fits the personnel that you have, I think that's when you can really maximize potential. So to see what the Dolphins have been able to put together, and like you said, I think the pieces aspect, thinking about guys like Liam Eichenberg and Jack Driscoll being, in your reserve lineup, right? Like having guys like that who have who've had real live game action, guys who have been a part of pretty successful offensive line units. Obviously, Philly has had one of the stronger offensive lines for some time, and Eichenberg, was really in the lineup a lot over the last couple seasons as Mike McDaniel was really getting things established down there in South Beach. So I do like this unit. I do think that I think to me the importance for the important thing for them is their depth. I think being able to have so much depth is really important because very similar to the Jets, they've got some frontline guys that have been banged up, but they've got some depth that will allow them to be able to rotate guys in as needed as the year goes along. Because like you said, it's a long season, and when you're a team like them, a team like the Jets, a team like who we're going to be talking about next, the Buffalo Bills, if you don't have the depth to be able to keep retooling and poking and prodding your offensive line as the season goes along, that can really get exposed, especially in the later months of the season.
Absolutely. So without further ado, let's get into the Buffalo Bills. Boom. There it is. 15th overall. I want to know, as a fan, what do you think of the ranking? I also want to know just general what you think of the Buffalo Bills line as somebody who follows the team closely and is in the area.
Yeah, well, when I first initially got the ranking, the fan in me was like, "What the heck? How are the Dolphins offensive line that much better?" And the Jets are good, but they're overrated. But then I had to like really put my analyst hat on, and I think with just considering some of the depth things that we talked about before, right? Some things that have stood out to me about the Jets and Dolphins lines respectively versus the Bills is that I just think both groups have a little bit more depth. Now, if it comes to if we're talking strictly the front five, I love the Bills starting five. Deion Dawkins, easily one of the most underrated left tackles in all of football. A guy that you really like signing wise, David Edwards, who again coming over from pretty successful offense in LA with the Rams. So having a guy like that at center. I know you talked a little bit about your continuity aspect of things. And the Bills, yes, they are starting a new guy at center. However, it's Connor McGovern, who is just moving from left guard to center, replacing Mitch Morris there, who's down in Jacksonville now. So being able to have a guy who's now slotted at a position that's more natural for him, I think makes a lot of sense. And especially just, again, talk about injuries. Mitch Morris, love the guy. He was a great player for the team, great leader up front. But, he had a lot of concerns as far as, with his concussion history and things like that. So, who's to say that, Connor McGovern couldn't be an upgrade because he could be a more long-term starter for the Bills. Osiris Torrance is, a guy that I am really intrigued to see in year two. He had some ups and downs for sure, but, you can't really teach the size that he possesses. And I think he is a guy that, as he continues on here in his development, in his maturation, I think he will only get better, especially being next to a guy who we've seen that play out with in Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown is a guy to me that, he, again, very similar to Osiris Torrance, where, you can't teach size. You can't teach, 6'7", 6'8". That's just a lot to account for out on the edges there. But, I think he has been able to tighten up things. He's cleaned up his game, less penalties last year, not giving up as many sacks as well. It was his highest graded season according to PFF as well last season, So, I think Spencer Brown entering year 4, will continue to help Osiris Torrance as he comes along in his process. So, and I think also too, now that the Bills have gotten into more of, they're at a point now where, from all accounts, it seems as though they're going to be a much more 2 tight end, play action, single back looks, getting James Cook the ball, pounding the rock a little bit. I think that fits this style of this offensive line. I think it's built for that style of play. So to be able to transition to that, from the peak of 2020 where it was, running gunning with Diggs and Beasley and Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox and Josh Allen slinging the thing around. I really do think that, the way that Joe Brady wants to call the offense and the way that he wants to tailor things around this group of weapons, I think it also makes sense for this group. But like I said before, the one thing I'm concerned about is the depth. As far as a wild card, there's 2 names that stand out to me, one more so than another. But the biggest wild card, in my opinion, for the Bills is Lyle Collins. Because at his peak, again, another high-level starter when he's healthy, and truly an offensive lineman. Yes, he could come in and start at tackle, but I think he might even be best suited in this lineup as a guard. So if things don't work out with Osiris Torrance, if things don't work out with David Edwards, I think Lyle Collins is a guy that could slide right in, as well as Will Clapp. He's another guy who has, again, seen some action. I think it works better for him being a reserve than a starter for this group. But, again, those 2 stand out to me. The kid from Georgia that they drafted as well, I think, is another name to keep an eye out for as the preseason rolls along. But, like I said, as a Bills fan, I'm a little worried about the depth. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on this group as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, you made a lot of really good points. As a person who has to set these lineups from week to week, it's troubling how many times I've had to pull Mitch Morse's name out of the lineup for a concussion. And I'm not going to say anything other than that. I just get concerned for these players as humans. So when you make a change like that, it's almost like, can you rely on him when you need him the most? Like nobody's going to question the man's spirit and willingness to play. But when you're in the AFC Championship game or when you're deep in the playoffs, availability is really what you're looking for. And keeping that starting 5 is awesome. So we actually were lucky enough to see the Bills starting 5 in action yesterday, and I have a clip of that which I will set up. Now, these are all the guys you talked about. This is Spencer Brown, Osiris Torrance, new center, David Edwards, and Deion Dawkins. And they are setting up a pocket for Mitch Trubisky, who makes a pretty routine out. And there was several plays like this in the first quarter where I could have picked other plays as an example, but there's a really comfortable pocket here. And it's, even though it's Trubisky back there, it makes me think, Josh Allen is going to like operating back there if he gets that kind of space. And so I like the Bills line. I think they're actually very interesting, very solid group. Who is their high-end talent? It's Dawkins. And if he, maintains his level of play, they can be a top 10 line very easily. I think fans start to look at the rankings and they start comparing them, but all it takes is 1 or 2 injuries, and before you know it, the Bills are ranked 9th, and it's the same guys. You just got to remember it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I think the front guys are awesome, especially Brown picking up these the twist and everything. Edwards looking for work. It's just a good group. Even the running back, shout out to number 22. I think that might be the new running back. I'm not sure, but
yeah, it's Ray Davis there from the Kentucky kid.
That's a little bit of a taste of the Bills line. I think they're set up to do everything they need to do. There's no real deficiencies or weak spots there. Sometimes you look at lines and you say, they're doing great, except that center is a disaster. It's like, no, these guys are pretty solid, and hopefully they don't have to get into the depth too much, but that's how it goes. I think it's kind of the reality of the salary cap world. You can't have necessarily everybody and the quarterback making big money. So you have to make decisions on who your bench players are. And I think 15 is a low underrated. So 12 for the Dolphins might be overrated, and 8 for the Jets might be overrated, and 15 might be underrated for the Bills, to be fair. To be completely fair.
Yeah, no, I think like you said, I think it's a very fair assessment. They don't necessarily have a ton of elite high-end talent, but no glaring holes, no true weaknesses. I mean, I think it's just a very solid group that does its job. They've got obviously one of the best signal callers in the league behind them as well. So, I think being able to give Josh time, even a guy like him, Josh, can make the spectacular happen, unlike most. So because of that, he doesn't necessarily need all of the time in the world that other guys need, especially considering his mobility. And then also too, you factoring in, they want to run the ball with a guy like James Cook, but now that, like I said, you add a guy like Ray Davis into the mix, you add, Ty Johnson into the mix. I think this is going to be a very balanced offense, and I think it's very, very conducive to success with the type of offensive line that they've put in front of those guys.
I agree. And we got one more team to go, the New England Patriots. Boom, 23 overall.
Listen, so all the Pats fans out there, I know you guys aren't used to being at the bottom. It's all good. Listen, if you guys need help, we get it. But you're going to have to get used to it for a little bit, because as a Bills fan and Matt being a Jets fan, we can definitely share a little bit of the tales from the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, we should get into the nitty gritty of why they're down there, as opposed to my emotions behind it. I've been trying to detach myself. A side note, I'm not going to engage in bad karma. I wish all the rest of the AFC East teams a healthy and happy season, except when we play each other. You know what I mean? We all know the real enemy is the NFC. I don't know. I don't really know. I just feel like I never was a fan of rooting for other teams' guys to get hurt, or it's a game, and it should be not to say we were engaging in that there, but I've also gone to Giant Stadium before it was MetLife many times, and I've seen Tom Brady blow out my team in person probably 6 or 7 times, and it was not a fun experience for years and years to go make the effort, do the tailgate, to go out there and just get blown out. So that's where that's coming from, you guys. Without further ado, here's a little bit of a taste of the Patriots game yesterday or the day before against Carolina. You're looking at kind of a mixture of first teamers and second teamers running a screen. I think this is going to be kind of their bread and butter, screens and jump offs. When you get into the situation where teams are going to start to tee off on this inexperienced left tackle, whoever it is. I think it's Vidarian Lowe in this particular clip, but Onwenu at right tackle is a solid guy. He's probably better at guard than he is at tackle. I think he could be an all-pro at guard, but they're kind of using him at right tackle out of necessity. But I think if you're looking at the Patriots for fantasy purposes, you're looking at backs having a lot of sort of dump off production, screens, draws. They're going to have to do something to sort of, take the edge off these rushers that are going to be coming. And, defensive backs too are going to be circling their calendar thinking, especially if Drake May gets play, they're thinking I can get a pick here. It's not a high powered offense right now. And unfortunately you can't always rank the offensive lines and be like, this is a good offensive line and a bad offense. It's kind of like, they kind of go together in a lot of ways. I've learned that over the last 10 years. So I don't even really fully know who were all the players in that clip, but that is a clip from yesterday's preseason action. And just one more thing before I throw it back over to you, we should be cautious because a lot of these teams, like Buffalo, are very vanilla in preseason and they don't want to expose their actual play calls, their actual blocking schemes. So when we're looking at preseason clips, it's easy to think, oh, team A is doing great and team B is not so good, but they're saving their good plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think too, what you mentioned, Matt, just makes so much sense about, you know, is it's the chicken or the egg? Is the offense bad because of the line, or is the line looking bad because of the offense? Or vice versa. I think to see that the Pats are ranked 23rd. To be honest, as an offensive line unit, that's actually a little bit higher than I would have anticipated, considering the offense. That's a bottom 3 offense in the NFL very easily. When you got a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, who's not necessarily considered good enough to be, on that roster. I get it. I'm sure part of it was financial, but they were so willing to move on from him. I think that just goes to show the type of skill position group that they have around this offensive line as well. This offensive line, at the moment, is projected to start Caden Wallace, rookie third round pick at left tackle. Second-year guard Sidney Sal is projected to start at left guard. In the interim of Cole Strange, because Cole Strange is actually on the PUP list right now. The 2 most veteran guys, as far as guys who've not only been successful but have been around for some time for the Pats, are David Andrews at center and Mike Owenu, as you mentioned earlier, Matt. And one of the new starters for the Pats offensive line is going to be at right tackle, and that's Chuck Okafor from Pittsburgh. Signed him from the Steelers, and he had his ups and downs while he was down in the Keystone State. But I think, like you mentioned, this group, it's like what we talked about with some of our other with the other lines today, right? Okay, where's the high end talent? Okay, David Andrews, very easily one of the best centers in football, 100%, no question. Michael Wenu, when healthy, definitely one of the best guards in football, 1,000%. But we're talking about 2 guys in the interior, right? Again, very good players, but when your best impact players for your unit are on the interior, you got some question marks on the edges there. Not only from a experience standpoint, from from the guys who do have experience, right? Like Chuck Okafor is not necessarily considered, one of the best offensive tackles in the game, So it's not like this unit has, some of the horses that some of the other units that we've talked about have, right? But I do think that there is enough of a base to build around. I think a part of the reason why they are ranked 23rd, mentioning Andrews and Owenu, I think, behind those guys lead, this is still one of the best rushing offenses in football. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy that, he was able to produce even in, one of the lowest tier offenses in football, right? He was still able to put together a pretty solid season last year, as far as, having over 850 yards from scrimmage. And that's saying something considering some of the, deficiencies that the unit had overall, or the offense had overall. So I don't dislike necessarily this unit. I don't think it's the worst unit. High end talent is not necessarily the best overall. They do have some pieces, but like I said, having guys on the edges, that are your biggest question mark versus, your strongest guys being inside, and 2 of the 3, interior guys that I'm talking about with Onwenu, Andrews, and Cole Strange. 2 of those 3 have had significant injury issues, right? So because of that, it's like, all right, well, as much as you want to rely and have faith in this unit, being able to be kind of the centering piece of this group, I don't think that's necessarily what they can rely on, just because there's a list of other question marks across the group.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a rebuilding year. I mean, you've got new head coach who I actually like a great deal. But when you have a person who's a first-time head coach in Mayo, you're going to learn some lessons that first year. There's nothing quite like it. When you look across the sideline and you see Andy Reid, or you look across the sideline and you see Doug Peterson, or all these guys that are experienced, it's going to be a learning process for the coach. It's going to be a learning process for the first round draft pick quarterback, if he even gets to play. And it's going to be a learning process for these guys like Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson, these sort of pieces that'll fit in. In that clip, you saw Antonio Gibson, number 21 at running back. He was a player I liked a lot coming out of the draft. I mean, a guy with that sort of speed at running back, when really he's more of a wide receiver, is a very interesting kind of player, especially in PPR leagues. You know, it's hard when you're drafting and in fantasy and there's all these running backs by committees, but some guys are going to break loose, and he has the ability to break loose in terms of number 2s. You know, he's not necessarily a guy that's a number 1 back, but as you mentioned, Stevenson plus Gibson, I mean, I feel like they're going to be a live underdog or a contender, but it could also, the bottom could fall out real fast, and 23 could be looking like rare air by the time we get to the end of the season if things don't play out well for them. Injury wise, Cole Strange, I wouldn't hold out much hope for in terms of playing early in the year. And sometimes, you know, you do this long enough, the guys, sometimes they don't come back, or, you know, the body just gives out, and you're like Ryan Ramczyk or like David Bakhtiari, you take a year off, maybe, you know, I mean, like that sometimes happens, but I think it's looking like a long campaign for the Patriots. So we've got our 4 lines. We've touched on them. We have made it through the first podcast of Down the Line Football. Hopefully many more to come, and we will learn how to add fancy graphics and better audio control. But before we get off the air, I wanted to ask you, do you have any final thoughts for the people out there who are definitely going to be watching, because they want to know what offensive lines are good and which ones are bad?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, just first and foremost, thank you all for joining us and watching and tuning in. You know, really excited to be talking some offensive line with, you know, a fellow offensive line lover, really, you know, someone who played the sport at some point as well. You know, I think it's always cool to be able to reconnect with guys, you know, that have been in the trenches before. But, you know, really excited to get, you know, more offensive line stuff going for you all. You know, our next podcast we're planning to do is about the NFC East offensive lines. So looking forward to diving in there. But yeah, really excited to get this thing going. And if you guys have any questions, you know where to find us. That's my @name on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, Khari_Demos. So any questions for me, please send them my way there. But yeah, really looking forward to getting this thing going with you, Matt.
Yeah, well, I'll be able to talk about Mekhi Becton, the new starting right guard of the Philadelphia Eagles, in our next podcast about the NFC East. I'll have a lot of interesting comments about that. But until then, my name is Matt Bitonti, and you can get my stuff at Football Guys. We are out of here.
Adios.